Genevieve Kensington's eyes froze on a carousel horse with human teeth. Its cracked, painted mouth hung open, revealing rows of needle-sharp, yellowed teeth that glistened wetly under the bruised twilight. The wind, a constant shriek tearing through the narrow alley between crumbling tenements, carried whispers that slithered into her ears like cold fingers. Finnew left the light. The alley walls, peeling with damp, flaking paint the color of dried blood, pressed in, the gale force gusts making the air vibrate with a high-pitched whine that set her teeth on edge. She stumbled forward, boots crunching on broken glass, and something else, small, sharp, and unnaturally cold. Shatter, shatter. Sound echoed in the confined space, each step a fresh fracture beneath her feet. The canal lay ahead, a murky ribbon of stagnant water choked with algae. The glass-bottomed boat, usually bobbing with tourists, drifted silently, its hull dark against the oily surface. Its windows were opaque, reflecting the bruised purple sky and the sickly iridescence of the oil slicks clinging to the water's surface. A cat sat on the dock, a silhouette against the gloom. Its fur shimmered with that same iridescent sheen, like oil on water, and emitted a low, persistent electrical hum that thrummed in Genevieve's bones. Fair reflection of what was lost, sophist, sharp and painful. The cat's purr, a deep resonant vibration, seemed to intensify the pressure building behind her own eyes, a dull, insistent ache that made the world tilt. She stepped onto the dock, the wood groaning under her weight. The wind snatched at her thin jacket, carrying the scent of wet stone and decay. As she neared the boat, a sudden, localized temperature drop struck her skin. Not cold, but a deep, unnatural frosty, spreading across her forearm like intricate lace. She watched, mesmerized, as the frost patterns bloomed, tracing lines that mirrored the teeth of the carousel horse. Frost on skin of her kin, the whispering wind seemed to sigh. Frozen gaze. Then she blinked, just once, a fraction of a second. On the boat's glass floor, a small lead soldier, no taller than her thumb, stood where it hadn't been before. It began to move. Its tiny lead boots clicked with a sharp, metallic tink-tink on the glass, a sound unnervingly clear in the wind's roar. Click, 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 click. It advanced towards her, the motion precise, deliberate, the frost patterns on her skin flaring with cold intensity. The cat on the dock lifted its head, its eyes glowing faintly amber, the electrical hum rising in pitch, the purr vibrating the air. Footy, a fortifier. The thought slithered through her fury. It's amplifying the soldier. The pressure behind her eyes flared a white-hot spike. She saw the soldier's lead face, smooth and featureless, turning towards her. The clicking grew louder, faster, fa-tink, tink, 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 echoing in the hollow space between the canal walls. The frost on her palm spread, crystalline and sharp. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones, the whispers sharpening into a single, chilling word, Ferregret. The lead soldier stopped directly before her, its tiny lead boots clicking on the glass-bottom deck, as Genevieve's breath fogged the frost on her own palm. The lighthouse exhaled around me, a slow, groaning breath of salt and rust. I jolted awake to the weight of the dream still clinging to my lashes, thick, syrupy, like the oil slicks that choked the canal. The iridescent glow of twilight seeped through the cracked panes, painting the room in streaks of bruised purple and sickly green, the light refracting off the spider. Silk dream catchers strung along the walls. They swayed, though there was no wind inside. The air hummed, a low, resonant vibration that thrummed in my ribs, like the cat's purr but deeper, heavier, rung. My fingers twitched toward the lantern beside the bed, but the glass was already lit, casting long, jagged shadows that stretched and twisted as if alive. The scarecrow stood in the corner, its straw limbs rigid, its hollow eyes fixed on me. It had been there when I'd left, a silent sentinel draped in tattered robes the color of dried blood. But now, its form shifted, subtly, impossibly, as if the very air around it pulsed with stolen breath. The pressure behind my eyes flared, a white-hot spike that made my vision blur. Not a dream, not yet. The ache was too real, too physical, pressing against my skull like fingers digging into wet clay. I swallowed hard, the movement sending a fresh wave of nausea through me. The dream catchers swayed again, their silk strands glistening with something dark, something that wasn't due. I turned away, forcing my legs to move, forcing my body to obey. The floorboards groaned beneath me, the sound too loud to presenter, like the lighthouse itself was holding its breath. The routine was a shield polishing the brass, checking the fuel, the rhythmic motion of it all grounding me in something tangible. But the air was thick with the scent of wet straw and something else, something coppery, metallic. My hands trembled as I reached for the lantern's wick, the glass cold beneath my fingers. The light flickered, casting the scarecrow's shadow across the wall longer. Now its limbs twisted into something wrong. Something that shouldn't be possible then. The sound. A sharp, wet twitter split the air, so sudden it made my bones vibrate. I spun around before I could stop myself, my breath catching in my throat. The scarecrow's robe had torn not from the wind, not from time, but as if something had fiffin grabbed it from the inside. A jagged gash yawned open in its chest, dark and glistening, the edges raw and weeping. Not straw, not stuffing. Wet, glistening. My stomach lurched as I realized what lay beneath. The cavity wasn't empty. It was swordful, a writhing mass of something that looked like exposed sinew, like the inside of a wound that had never healed. The scent of it hit me first. Copper, iron, the sharp, acrid tang of old blood. My fingers twitched toward my own chest, the pressure behind my eyes flaring into pain so intense it made my knees buckle. The scarecrow's hollow eyes turned toward me, its straw mouth stretching into something that wasn't a smile. The air around it shivered, the dream catchers trembling as if caught in a gust. The pressure in my skull built a crescendo of sound and sensation, the whispers from the alley slithering back into my mind. Regret. The word coiled around my thoughts, tight and suffocating. The scarecrow's chest pulsed, the gash widening, the glistening mass inside thunder-moving, twisting in a slow, wet rhythm that made my skin crawl. I couldn't look away, couldn't breathe. The light from the lantern flickered again, the shadows stretching, reaching, the edges of my vision darkening as the pressure behind my eyes became a storm. The alley exhaled cold, a sudden violent breath that stole the heat from my bones before I could even register the shift. One moment, the air was thick with the damp rot of old wood and the copper tang of rain-slicked steel. The next, it snapped like a frozen lake cracking underfoot. My breath hitched white, ghostly before I could clamp my teeth down on it. The frost came first, creeping up my arms in jagged, porcelain veins, the cold biting so deep it felt like my skin was being peeled back from the inside. I hissed through gritted teeth, fingers digging into the rough stone wall, the symbols carved there biting into my palms like thorns. Same as the lighthouse. The realization slithered in, cold and sharp. The markings pulsed faintly, a sickly iridescent glow seeping from the grooves, matching the oil-slick sheen of the alley's puddles. The water fin-shivered, rippling without wind, without cause, just like the dream catchers back home. The whispers started then. Not the usual murmur of the wind through the eaves, not the distant clatter of samurai boots on cobblestone. These were Sudin sea-dyed me, slithering out from behind my eyes, a chorus of voices that weren't voices at all, just shapes, jagged and hungry, pressing against my skull. Regret. The word coiled around my ribs, tight and suffocating, the same word that had clawed its way into my dreams. I pressed my fists against my temples, but the pressure only intensified, a white-hot brand searing behind my eyes. The alley screamed with it, the sound vibrating in my teeth, scurra, like a blade being dragged across bone. Then the footsteps, metallic, heavy. The rhythm was wrong, too precise, too deliberate, like a man counting his steps before a beheading. My head snapped up. The alley's mouth was a throat of shadow, the samurai armor lining the walls suddenly fin-moving, the breastplates shifting like living things. The whispers sharpened into a chorus, a dozen voices overlapping, turn around. Turn around. My pulse hammered in my throat as I did, slow, deliberate, because I knew what I'd see. They were already there. 3 figures, armored in blackened steel, their helms obscured by the hoods of their lacquered cloaks. The symbols on their pauldron matched the ones on the wall, the ones on the lighthouse floor. Whammy symbols. My hands trembled. The cold was spreading now, frost creeping up my neck, my jaw, the edges of my vision darkening at the edges. The lead soldier took a step forward, his boots clanking like a funeral bell, the sound echoing in the confined space, bouncing off the walls in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The other 2 followed, their steps synchronized, their whispers merging into a single, guttural chant. You should have stayed. The words slithered into my mind, and for a second I remembered the lighthouse, the dream catchers, the way the scarecrow's chest had twin-pulsed. My stomach lurched, a hum cut through the chaos. Low, electrical, familiar. I turned, my breath fogging in the sudden cold, and there it was, the cat, perched on the stone pedestal at the alley's end, its fur bristling with static, the air around it vibrating like a plucked string. The lead soldier stopped inches from its paws, its tiny lead head tilting up, its hollow eyes locking onto me. The hum intensified, a deep, resonant, twiven thrum that made my teeth ache. The cat's tail flicked once, twice each movement sending a jolt through the air, like the crackle of a dying fire. The soldier's head snapped toward me. Its mouth, what passed for a mouth, twisted into something that wasn't a smile. The whispers in my skull screamed, a cacophony of voices overlapping, "You brought it here. You brought it all here." The frost on my skin cracked, spreading like spiderwebs, the cold seeping into my veins. The cat's purr grew louder, the electrical hum a living thing, pressing against my skin, my bones. The soldier's lead fingers twitched, its tiny hand curling into a fist. Then it Fadimov died. The wind hulled, a banshee's lament tearing at the lighthouse. Stone, it wasn't just wind, it was a pressure, a tangible force shoving against my ribs, each gust a whispered accusation. The footsteps hadn't stopped. They echoed in the lantern room, a slow, deliberate for the two-thud. The D, against the stone floor, each impact a hammer blow against my skull. The pressure behind my eyes intensified, a throbbing white light threatening to consume me. Fury, a molten core, flared within me, a desperate heat against the encroaching cold. It was a familiar heat, the same one that had burned in my veins the last time I defaced him. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to acknowledge him, but the reflections, they were everywhere. Each window, each polished brass fitting, showed his distorted image, the scarecrow, not a solid form, but a shifting, unstable mockery, woven from shadow and regret. He wasn't twined there, not truly, but his presence clung to the air like the smell of rot. The thud-clack of the metal door opening was a gunshot in the storm. I didn't turn. I couldn't. My muscles coiled, a taut spring ready to unleash. The lighthouse was a cage, and he was the jailer. I tasted blood, the metallic tang sharp on my tongue. The pressure behind my eyes spiked, and I squeezed them shut, willing the images away. It's not real. He's not real. Asterisk, but the wind carried his voice, a distorted echo of my own thoughts. Running one, to change anything, Genevieve. The words slithered into my mind, cold and precise, like a poisoned dart. I lunged. The door slammed behind me, and I was swallowed by the gale. Rain lashed at my face, a million icy needles piercing my skin. The wind Thovan screamed, tearing at my cloak, threatening to rip me from the narrow walkway that spiraled down the lighthouse. Exterior. Debris of fatted glass, splintered wood flew past, each piece a potential wound. I tasted the rain, bitter and metallic below. The coastline was a churning black void. The seafood roared, a monstrous beast hungry for release. I didn't look down. I could afford to. The footsteps followed me, relentless, unwavering. They weren't on the walkway. They were sooty in the wind, woven into the storm itself. The pressure behind my eyes was a vice, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt a tremor in my hands, a subtle vibration that resonated with the wind. Howl, the iridescent sheen, the same sickly glow seen in the alley, clung to the rain, painting the world in a grotesque oily palette. Parameter 15. I stumbled, my boots slipping on the wet stone. The wind whipped around me, a physical assault, trying to force me back inside. But I pushed on, driven by a desperate, primal urge to escape, to outrun the echoes of my past. Then I saw him. He wasn't in a window this time. He was severed there, standing in the path of the gale, his form wavering like heat rising from pavement, the scarecrow. But it wasn't the scarecrow I remembered. It was more the shadows coalesced, hardening into a recognizable shape. My shape. The same haunted eyes, the same tight, lipped expression, the same simmering fury. He was a mirror, reflecting my own despair. His eyes locked onto mine, and the pressure behind my eyes exploded. A wave of nausea slammed into me, and I staggered back, clutching my head. The wind wailed, a mournful cry that seemed to emanate from the figure itself. "You can escape yourself, Genevieve," he said, his voice a perfect echo of my own. "You carry the burden." The figure's form shifted, blurring at the edges, yet the eyes remained cold and unwavering. They held the exact terrifying fury that I felt burning within me. The iridescent sheen clung to his form, making him appear almost liquid, as if he were dissolving into the storm. A single drop of rain, thick and viscous, rolled down his cheek, leaving a shimmering trail. The wind whipped at his cloak, revealing a glimpse of something beneath 20, something dark, something vast, something utterly unknowable. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that he wasn't just a reflection. He was becoming something more. something real. The moonflower tincture tasted of ash and regret. It clung to the back of my throat, a bitter film coating my tongue. The lighthouse twisted, not physically but in my perception. The stone walls breathed. The spiral staircase seemed to shift and buckle, and every reflection tendy, every polished brass fitting, every pane of glass tent held the scarecrow, his mocking grin. It wasn't a single image anymore. It was a chorus, 1,000 distorted faces whispering my failures. The wind twin moaned through the cracks in the lantern room, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in my bones. It felt less like wind and more like a physical pressure, a weight pushing down on me. The footsteps hadn't ceased. They were everywhere now, not just on the stone floor, but echoing in the very structure of the lighthouse. Fud. Asterisk, each impact a hammer blow against the fragile membrane of my sanity. I stared into a shattered mirror, the fragments reflecting a fractured version of myself. My grandmother's eyes stared back, hollow and haunted. My mother's lips perpetually pressed into a silent, sorrowful line, and then superimposed over them all, the scarecrow's leering face. The iridescent sheen, that sickly purple, green glow pulsed from the broken glass, painting the scene in a grotesque, oily light. Parameter 15. Beside me, the cat shifted, its fur brushing against my leg. A faint electrical hum emanated from its form, a subtle vibration that resonated with the tremor in my hands. It was a familiar comfort, a small anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. I reached down, stroking its fur, the sensation oddly clinical, as if I were observing a specimen rather than a companion. The cat's reflection in the broken glass shimmered, distorted, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. "It's all your fault, Genevieve," the scarecrow's voice whispered, not from outside, but from within my own head. The words were laced with my own self. Loathing, my own despair. "You carry the burden." The weight of it pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket of guilt. Grandmother's suicide. Mother's silence, the lighthouse itself, a monument to a lineage of broken women. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the voices, the images, the overwhelming sense of dread. The pressure behind my eyes intensified, a throbbing white light threatening to consume me. Her's not real. They're not real. Asterisk, but the lighthouse seemed to pulse with the scarecrow's presence, the very stones radiating a cold, malevolent energy. The scent of salt and decay filled my nostrils, a nauseating combination that triggered a wave of dizziness. I stumbled, my hand reaching out to steady myself against the wall. The stone felt cold and damp beneath my fingertips, slick with a residue I couldn't quite identify. A single drop of water, thick and viscous, dripped from the ceiling, landing on my hand with a faint furty splat. I looked down. The drop wasn't tea water. It was a viscous, iridescent fluid, the same sickly purple, green, as the sheen clinging to the scarecrow's image. The floor beneath my feet cracked to spiderweb of fissures spreading outwards from the point of impact. The sound was sharp, brittle, like the shattering of bone. I looked back at the mirror. The cat's reflection in the broken glass pulsed, its electrical hum growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was a window, and something was moving on the other side. The lead soldier, the small, tarnished figure I found tucked away in my grandmother's belongings, parameter 13, began to march. Not across the floor, but forward through the fractured mirror. Each tiny footfall was a click, a precise and unsettling rhythm that resonated with the pounding in my head. Click, 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 click. Asterisk, it moved with an unnatural gait, its painted eyes fixed on me with a chilling intensity. The wind fund howled dead, a rising crescendo of sound that drowned out all other noise. The cat's purr amplified, a deafening drone that vibrated in my skull. The pressure behind my eyes became unbearable. I gasped, a strangled sound lost in the storm. The lead soldier froze. A tiny metallic tremor ran through its form, a miniature earthquake that resonated within the oppressive silence that had abruptly replaced the wind's howl. Its painted eye, a pinpoint of obsidian, fixed on me with a chilling, unsettling familiarity. Click, click. Asterisk, the sound, sharp and precise, echoed the cessation of its march. It was a punctuation mark on a sentence I hadn't realized I was reading. The cat's purr, previously a deafening drone, now morphed into a low, insistent thrum that vibrated through the floor, up my legs and into my chest. It felt less like a comforting sound and more like a tuning fork, resonating with a frequency I couldn't quite place. The iridescent oil slick that coated the walls pulsed, its sickly purple, green glow intensifying, reflecting the soldier's unwavering gaze. I could feel the pressure behind my eyes building again, a throbbing white light threatening to shatter the fragile structure of my perception. The dream catchers, woven from what felt like strands of raw grief, hung suspended in the air, their delicate webs shimmering with an unnatural luminescence. Each one seemed to capture a fragment of a memory, a whispered regret, a silent scream. I reached out, tentatively touching one. The web felt cold and damp against my skin, leaving a residue that smelled faintly of brine and decay, fabric-ripping foe. A sound so subtle, so fleeting, that I almost dismissed it as a phantom. But it was there, woven into the thrumming purr, a mournful sigh escaping the lighthouse. Stone lungs. The waterfall of liquid shadow cascaded from the ceiling, obscuring the door beyond. It wasn't tea water, but a viscous black substance that seemed to absorb all light, creating a void that beckoned and repelled in equal measure. The air around it felt heavy, suffocating, as if the very atmosphere were pressing down on me. I could taste it, a metallic tang coating my tongue, a bitter reminder of the moonflower tincture's lingering effects. Waiting. The scarecrow's voice whispered, closer this time, not just in my head, but seemingly emanating from the shadow itself. The words were laced with a perverse kind of encouragement, a sinister invitation. He wants to see you, Genevieve. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the urge to succumb to the darkness. As not real. They not real. Asterisk, but the lighthouse seemed to amplify the scarecrow. Seth's presence, the very stones radiating a cold, malevolent energy. My grandmother, sighs, my mother, lips, the scarecrow, leering face, zhijing. Faced heavy, they were all converging, merging into a single, horrifying image. The cat nudged my leg, its electrical hum intensifying, a tangible pressure against my skin. It was urging me forward, pushing me towards the shadow. I opened my eyes, reluctantly, and stared at the door hidden behind the cascade. It wasn't tea made of wood or stone, but of something else. Something that seemed to shift and writhe in the pulsing light. It was ancient, weathered, etched with cryptic symbols that seemed to writhe and twist before my eyes. Parameter 2. My fingers trembled as I reached out, brushing against the cold metal. The touch sent a jolt of energy through my body, a wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. The pressure behind my eyes spiked, a searing pain that made me gasp. The lead soldier, motionless for a fraction of a second, jerked violently, its tiny body vibrating with an unnatural intensity. Hike. Click. Asterisk, it wasn't tea marching now, but twitching, spasming, as if struggling against an unseen force. The cat's purr reached a fever pitch, a deafening roar that drowned out all other sounds. The iridescent oil slick pulsed, its sickly green glow intensifying, painting the scene in a grotesque, oily light. Parameter 15. The waterfall of shadow seemed to coalesce, to solidify, forming a doorway into an unknown abyss. As my fingers fully encompassed the cold metal, a final chilling realization washed over me. The soldier wasn't just observing me, it was mimicking me, its movements, its posture, its very stillness. Sifa, they were all reflecting my own growing fear, my own despair. The figure from the inciting incident, P12, was a projection of my own terror, growing more tangible with each chapter. And now, it was staring back at me, not with malice, but with a terrifying, hollow recognition. The blink was a betrayal. A single, involuntary flutter, and the soldier moved click, 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 its lead boots chewing through the wet stone like a rat gnawing bone. The air thickened, the scent of brine and rust curling into my throat. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. The cat's hum vibrated against my ribs, a low, insistent pulse, its fur bristling with static, forward, always forward. The corridor twisted, walls slick with the same iridescent oil, its purple-green sheen flickering like a dying flame. My fingers traced the cold metal of the soldier's flank as it passed, the texture rough beneath my skin, pitted with age and something worse, teeth jagged and black as old scars. The cat nudged my ankle, its weight a pressure, a demand I followed. The hole yawned ahead, vast and hollow, its ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was a grid of reflective pools, each one a mirror but not of me. Not yet. The first showed a girl of 12, knees raw from falling, her grandmother's voice still screaming in her ears. The second, a woman of 20 standing over a casket, her mother's face frozen in that rictus of hollow surprise. The third, why my now, my hands trembling, the soldier's march echoing in my skull like a drumbeat. Click, click, click. The cat's purr sharpened, a blade scraping bone. I stepped closer to the third pool, my reflection wavering like a candle in the wind. But it wasn't me, not entirely. The woman in the water had my eyes, my grandmother's eyes, but her mouth was my mother's, slack and bleeding, the skin splitting in wet, glistening strips. The air reeked of copper, of old blood, of vinaigrette. I reached out. The moment my fingertips brushed the surface, the pool screamed, not a sound, a sound, a sound, a cracking, a splitting the water. If it was water tearing itself apart like fabric. The reflection lunged forward, its mouth a ragged gash, teeth bared in a grin that wasn't a grin at all, but a feeling, flaying. The skin of its face sloughing off in glistening sheets. The cat's hum rose to a shriek, the oil slick behind it pulsing, throbbing, the purple-green light strobing like a dying heart. The soldier stopped. Clicked, Santinef. Its head turned, no neck turned, the joints bending wrong, the metal groaning like a dying man. It wasn't mimicking me anymore, it was Cydia learning, its obsidian eye fixed on the pool, on the thing that had been my mother, on the wet, glistening mess of her unraveling. The cat's fur stood on end, each hair crackling with static. I could taste it, its salt, iron, the metallic tang of the tincture still clinging to my tongue. The pressure behind my eyes exploded. A scream tore from my throat, but it was swallowed by the sound of the pool shattering, by the sound of 20th the scraping stone, by the sound of the soldier's boots unclick, click, click, marching toward the ruin, toward the thing that was my mother, toward the thing that was my mother. The oil slick boiled there, not bubbled, boiled there, the iridescent surface churning like a cauldron, the purple-green light strobing in violent pulses, as if the very air were alive. My breath came in ragged bursts, each inhalation tasting of salt and something sour, like the back of my tongue after a dream where I screamed but no sound came. The cat's hum wasn't a sound anymore. It was a forsy, a low electric growl vibrating through my bones, through the stone beneath my boots. The reflections in the shattered pools twin-twitched, not mirrored movements, but toothy living, their edges fraying like old photographs left too long in the sun. The girl of 12 wasn't a girl anymore. Her skin split along the seams of her knees, the raw flesh peeling back to reveal something dark and glistening beneath. Not blood, not muscle, but the same iridescent oil pooling in the cracks of her body. She turned her head slow, deliberate, her jaw unhinging with a wet 20 pop, and her grandmother's voice wasn't a scream anymore. It was a wind whisper, slithering up from the depths of the pools. You never came back. Her mother's face wasn't frozen, it was a melting, the skin dripping in slow, thick sheets, revealing the casket beneath, the wood rotting, the nails rusting, the air reeking of copper and damp earth. She raised a hand, fingers elongated, blackened at the tips like old burn marks, and pointed at me. You let her die. The pressure behind my eyes exploded. Not pain, pressure. A white-hot fury coiling in my chest, my stomach, grinding together until I tasted iron. The cat's fur stood on end, each hair crackling like a live wire, the static hum filling the air with the scent of ozone. I screamed, but it wasn't a sound. It was a future shatter, 1,000 glass fragments exploding outward, the reflections in the pool suit screaming back, their voices overlapping, drowning out my own. You never came back. You let her die. You never came back. The scarecrow stood where the third pool had been. Not a scarecrow, a man, or what had once been a man. His form was stitched together from rags and straw, but the stitches weren't sewn. They were stitched in the air, the threads glowing with the same purple-green light, pulsing in time with the oil slick. His eyes were empty, but his mouth moved, lips peeling back to reveal teeth that weren't teeth, needles, rusted and blackened, glinting in the strobing light. His hands were gloved in the same oil, the fingers flexing, the skin splitting along the seams, revealing the stolen dreams beneath. Faces, my faces, my mother's face, my grandmother's face. All screaming, all quine accusing. He stepped forward. The air frecked teeming. Not a sound, a sound. The fabric of the world tearing. The scarecrow's voice echoing in my skull. Not a whisper, not a scream, but a perfect echo of my own rage. You let her die. His hand reached for me. The fingers brushed my cheek, cold as death, the oil slicking my skin. the pressure behind my eyes went shattering, and for a moment I saw not the scarecrow, not the pools, not the reflections. But Twuddy, my mother, her face pressed against the glass of the boat's floor, her eyes wide, her mouth open. The wind howling, the whispers carrying her voice. You never came back. The lighthouse's core was a vortex. Not of light, not of wind, but of something colder. Something that pressed against my ribs, stealing the air from my lungs. The gale didn't just howl. It screamed through the stone, a chorus of lost voices clawing at the walls, rattling the thick glass of the lantern room above. Each gust tasted of salt and the metallic tang of impending rain. The cat, a black smudge against the swirling dust motes, sat beside me, its hum a low, insistent thrum against the rising tide of my dread. The purple light radiating from it warped the stone floor, turning the granite into a shifting pool of oil. It wasn't a weight anymore. This inheritance. It was a fire, a searing brand against my soul, each flicker of memory a fresh wave of pain. Mother's face pressed against the glass of the boat, her eyes wide and pleading. Grandmother's silence, a gaping wound in the family history. The lead soldier always there, always marching a tiny relentless procession across the floorboards. Each step thinkled, a mocking rhythm against the howling wind. The scarecrow's accusation echoed in my skull. You let her die. It wasn't just a voice, it was a splinter lodging itself deep within my bones. I closed my eyes, willing it away. But the darkness only amplified the sound sooty. The wind's shriek, the soldier's march, the cat's unnerving hum. I felt the pressure behind my eyes, a familiar tightening, a prelude to the unraveling. It was me, that realization struck with the force of a physical blow. The scarecrow wasn't some external entity. It was a grotesque caricature of my own guilt, my own fear given form. The stolen dreams woven into its rags weren't the dreams of others, they were my own, twisted and corrupted by regret. My mother's face, my grandmother's silence, all reflected in the scarecrow's empty eyes. A gallery of my failures. The wind intensified, the lighthouse groaning under the assault. The stone beneath my boots vibrated, a deep, resonant tremor that climbed into my teeth. I tasted blood, the metallic tang sharper now, mingling with the salt and the sourness of remembered screams. The cat's hum intensified, the purple light pulsating, bathing the room in an unsettling ethereal glow. I felt the lead soldier's coldness seeping into the floor, a creeping frost that spread across the stone. I saw her again, Mother, her face a ghostly mask pressed against the glass, the wind whipping her hair around her like a shroud. The whispers carried her voice, faint but distinct. You never came back. Each word a shard of ice piercing my heart. The cat's purr deepened, resonating with the soldier's march, amplifying the whispers, weaving them into a suffocating tapestry of regret. My hand trembled as I reached out, drawn to the cat's warmth, to the illusion of comfort it offered. The fur felt strangely coarse, almost bristling against my skin. As my fingers brushed against it, the pressure behind my eyes intensified, the world blurring at the edges. The scarecrow seemed to shift, to coalesce, its form becoming more defined, more real. The air crackled with static, the scent of ozone thick in my nostrils. The soldier's march accelerated, a frantic, desperate clatter. The whispers coalesced into a single, deafening roar. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable collapse. But instead of darkness, I felt warmth. A strange, comforting warmth radiating from the cat's fur, a counterpoint to the icy grip of regret. The purple light intensified, illuminating the room with an almost unbearable brilliance. I opened my eyes, and for a moment the scarecrow seemed to recede, its form flickering like a dying flame. The wind lessened, the whispers faded, the soldier's march slowed. I touched the cat. Its fur crackled like live wires beneath my fingers, the electrical hum vibrating up my arm and into my bones. The purple light flared, not just bathing the room now, but fun-pulsing with the rhythm of the lead soldier's march. Tink, tink, tink. Each step echoed in my skull, no longer a whisper but a physical vibration shaking the stone floor beneath my boots. The pressure behind my eyes wasn't just building. It was a faint thrumming sinking with the soldier's relentless beat. I felt the cold seep from the floor, the frost spreading like veins across the granite. But now it was overlaid with the cat's blinding iridescent glow. The oil-slick sheen on the stone rippled as if disturbed by the light itself. The wind screamed higher, a chorus of voices now screaming Feminine name. Mother's face pressed against the glass of the boat, her lips moving silently, her eyes wide with the same plea she'd worn the night. The sea took her. Grandmother's silence wasn't a wound anymore. It was a roar, a soundless scream of all the words she'd never spoken. The scarecrow shuddered, its rags tearing at the seams with a sound like silk shredding under a knife. Ha ha! A ha ha rip. A hush ha. The fabric ripping wasn't just noise, it was the sound of my own memories being unspooled, shredded into the storm. The cat's purr became a shriek, a high-pitched whine that set my teeth on edge. Its electrical aura flared, turning the purple light into a blinding, strobing pulse. The lead soldier's March 7 accelerated, the tiny boots clicking faster, harder, each twinkling a hammer blow against my ribs. The whispers coalesced into a single, deafening roar. You let her die. You let her die. You let her die. The pressure behind my eyes became a drumbeat, a physical force pressing inward, threatening to burst them open. I could taste the blood now coppery and thick mingling with the salt of the gale and the sour tang of regret. I stepped forward, not away, but into the storm. The cat's warmth flared hot against my palm, a counterpoint to the spreading frost. The iridescent oil slick on the stone seemed to pull me down, the purple light deepening into the color of bruised flesh. The soldier's footsteps were a physical force now, vibrating up my legs, shaking my knees. Tink, 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 tink. The sound wasn't just in my ears, it was in my bones, in the marrow. The fabric of the scarecrow tore again, a sound like 1,000 stitches snapping. A rip, a rip, a rip, the world dissolved into sound. The wind's shriek, the soldier's march, the fabric tearing, the cat's shrieking purr, all wove into a single suffocating tapestry. I felt the weight of the trauma not as a burden, but as a current, a river I could finally swim with. Mother's face softened, her lips moving not with accusation, but with something like relief. The pressure behind my eyes didn't burst. It released a wave of cold clarity. The scarecrow shuddered violently, its form flickering like a dying bulb, the stolen dreams within its rags unraveling into smoke. The cat's purr reached its peak, a sound that felt like lightning splitting the air. The purple light became blinding, searing the retinas. The iridescent oil slick on the stone began to flow, not as liquid, but as pure, shifting darkness. The soldier's march slowed, the clicks becoming deliberate, resonant. Futtink. The fabric ripped one last time, a sound like the world tearing itself apart. The lead soldier's tiny boot clicked once more on the stone floor. Click, then nothing. The wind died. The whispers vanished. The cat's hum ceased. The iridescent dark swallowed the room whole, and I was no longer standing on the lighthouse floor. I was falling into the oil-slicked void, the last sound the single, echoing click of a tiny boot on cold stone.